keep it civil. Reverend Mack.
Good evening. I'm Minister Corinne Mack, President of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg NAACP. And I stand on the shoulders of great Black leaders like Thurgood Marshall and John Lewis and Daisy Bates and Fannie Lou Hamer and Martin Luther King, people who are willing to lose their lives so that Black people could have a life and so that Black children could have an equitable education. And I stand here today in 2021 to discuss an educational harm, racism. I'm an anti-racist, and I believe it's important that we begin to teach the truth in the educational system. The rich, beautiful truth about Black people in this country, as well as the harms done to us. The hateful brutality against Black people for over 400 years. That's important because we are a resilient people and we don't wear our harms, but we walk around every single day traumatized. Because even in these days, we are dealing with hate, implicit bias, and bias in the educational system as well as outside of the educational system. Systemic racism hurts Black people and has for over 400 years, and it was intentional. Let's be clear, it was intentional. And so in my last words, because I hear about the Word of God so much in here today, the Word of God says, in all our getting, get understanding. It also says, the truth makes us free. So for those white folks who are uncomfortable, learn about our history so that you may be free, so that we can be free. Be free, beloved, be free.
We've got Suitor Conrad, then Gabriela Gomez Saxon, and then Nikki Wombwell.
My name is Suitor Conrad, and I'm an educator representing Education First Alliance, North Carolina. I'm here to oppose critical race theory in our schools. Critical race theory teaches children they are defined by their race, not as individuals. Isn't this what we've been trying to stop since the Civil War? Ibram Kennedy, who again was paid $25,000 by CMS to speak this summer, said, babies at 2 to 3 years old start internalizing racist ideas. They start discerning and making decisions based on racist ideas. We're allowing our society to raise them to be racist. This idea of his is completely false. As a mother of a 2-year-old, I guarantee you she does not know what race is. We have not taught it to her, therefore, she doesn't understand it. Racism is taught. Kids do not see it until they're shown it to them. Therefore, when we teach critical race theory in our classrooms, we are teaching that they are nothing more than the color of their skin. They are either oppressors or the oppressed. Teachers are agents of the government. And by allowing critical race theory to be taught in schools, that is a direct attack on children from our government. What we must do is prioritize character and academic excellence in our schools, which will in turn inspire children from all cultures and racial backgrounds to achieve their potential. In schools, students should be taught how to think, not what to think. I would like to end with a quote from Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson. We're doing our students a disservice, whether they are Black, white, brown, Native American, gay, straight, it doesn't matter. We need to be teaching them standards that are going to allow them to be good Americans.
Thank you. All right. We've got Gabriela Gomez Saxon, and then Nikki Wombwell, and then Gregory D. Rankin.
All right. I support CMS's efforts to create an inclusive curriculum, but this requires change. I went to Collinswood Language Academy and received a multicultural education. But since then, I have learned that we need an intercultural education, where there is an exchange of cultures and ideas, not just a mention of culture to check a box. As an intern for the Smithsonian Institution I have been working to expand education on Latino history and have realized the limitations of my own knowledge on the subject because I have been taught a whitewashed version of U.S. history. Through this internship, I am tasked with creating learning lab collections about influential Latino figures in American history. My first collection was about Dolores Huerta, a Chicana labor movement and civil rights activist, and that I had yet to be introduced to. She was just as important in leading the Delano grape strikes in 1965 as Cesar Chavez was, yet she is often dismissed in history books. What we did learn about slavery, Jim Crow, and the civil rights movement were one-sided and seemed to gloss over the oppression of racial minorities. For example, I was never taught about Emmett Till from Mississippi and the atrocities white men inflicted on the 14-year-old, and the history of police brutality in the United States and on minority groups. The only way we can progress as a society is to understand our nation through a holistic and inclusive approach to history. With this knowledge, we can learn from our past and progress towards more change, inclusivity, and justice. Thank you.
Thank you. Go right ahead.
My name is Nikki Wumwell, but you may know me as Jill Rowe from the lawsuit against CMS. I'm 22 years old. I love art and music and theater. I know 20 digits of pi. When I was 15 years old, I was raped in the woods by Myers Park High School, and it was covered up by the MP administration. I say all this because I need you to understand that I, Jill Rowe, am a real person, and I'm not against you. I continue to speak out because I care about CMS and its students. I know that there has been significant changes to the school district since I was a student, but the fact that survivors have come forward with stories like mine from 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, and 2019 shows that those changes have not been enough. There needs to be an overhaul of how this district handles reports of sexual violence at their schools. The sexual education system needs to be reformed so students know how to recognize and report this violence. And most importantly, there needs to be accountability for the Myers Park administration that has allowed and encouraged these atrocities to be swept under the rug because they value their reputation over their students' well-being. At this point, based on your silence, with the exception of that extremely hurtful and victim-blaming Facebook post, it feels like I care more about your students than you do. If you cared about your students, you wouldn't demean them on social media or set up police officers to stop their peaceful protests or make them erase their chalk, all while ignoring their legitimate cries for change. Your students are speaking up. You can either listen to them and do what's right, or you can fight it. But either way, we aren't going away. If you truly care about your students like you were elected to, you will ensure that there is accountability and justice for all their survivors that have been silenced. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Rankin, you're up.
My name is D. Rankin. I'm a member of the BPC Education Committee. I understand our school district has a long way to go when addressing student performance, especially around Black and brown students. But I would like to give credit where credit is due. Last year it was brought to my attention that due to COVID, a volatile social climate, and the newly adopted EO curriculum, there was a decision to exclude certain lessons from the curriculum. Lessons that included literature such as the narratives of Frederick Douglass, the Little Rock Nine, and the Holocaust. This was very disturbing, and due to concerns about omitting these very important lessons, CMS arranged meetings with the BPC Education Committee to give input on how to make the curriculum more diverse and inclusive. Thank you to Matt Hayes, Brian Kingsley, Beth Thompson, Randy Nelson, Pa Tao, and the entire CMS academic team for your willingness and dedication to make the CMS curriculum diverse and inclusive. Thank you for seeing the value in diversity and allowing students to see themselves within the lessons. Along the same time, the CMS leadership, along with the superintendent, saw the value in becoming a more anti-racist district. Thank you to your leadership. Thank you, Mr. Superintendent, for seeing the value in learning how race, power, and bias play a role in education as well as student outcomes. I'm here to ask you as a board and CMS leadership to continue this good work that you're doing. Continue to work towards becoming a more inclusive district. continue to work towards becoming an anti-racist district. According to the National Bureau of Economic Research, students that participated in an inclusive curriculum, their GPAs improved by 1.4% and attendance improved by 21%. Don't give in to these ill-informed individuals pushing a false narrative that our students are being taught to be anti-white. This is just not true. Although very important, reading and writing education is more about just reading and writing. It also includes learning about different cultures and seeing the value in all of the different cultures. So once again, please, thank you for your good work, and ask you continue to work towards allowing our students to become more educated in a culturally responsive manner. Thank you.
Okay, now we've got Stephanie Spivey, then Christine Van Meter, and then Steve Oreskovic. So Ms. Spivey is up. Spivey, I apologize.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm Stephanie Spivey from District 6. History justifies governance and the governing, and the narrative serves the politics. Teaching critical race facts is central to the spine of American history. It is not coincidental that we're having this fight over which story we would tell about this country. The very same people are trying to suppress the vote. While some oppose CRT, are you the same who oppose the removal of Confederate monuments? The American idea is indeed in trouble, as it should be. We're being taught stories, not facts, stories that secure virtue, that protects virtue. In 1965, two American titans faced off on the subject of the country's racial divides. Nearly 56 years ago later, the event has lost none of its relevance, the Cambridge debate. More than half of it is devoted to explaining how Baldwin and Buckley upbringings informed their ideological beliefs. Perhaps the opposition to critical race theory would have us satisfied with a dab of no oblige oblige, mixed with a bit of wait your turn for the truth to be taught? I don't think so. Board of Trustees, support the inclusive curriculum. No backward steps.
Thank you, Ms. Spivey. All right, Christine Van Meter, then Steve Oreskovic, and then Pastor Kate Murphy.
I'm going to assume, like most Americans, you all support our armed forces and might have a personal connection, as I do myself. An army not representative of the nation risks becoming illegitimate in the eyes of the people. It is imperative that we leverage all aspects of the nation's diversity to include gender, ethnicity, religion, education, thought, sexual orientation, and cultural background to create and sustain an inclusive organization that attracts the best the nation has to offer. This is quoted from the website of the Office of Diversity, Inclusion, and Equal Opportunity at West Point, our nation's premier academic and leadership institution. How can we sustain a force that's successful with future leaders if they carry a narrow, myopic, one-sided story of our country and its people? For our country to lead from the front, we are obligated to ensure children learn material that encompasses the honest history of all Americans and their ancestors, such as the Red Summer of 1919 and the 1944 GI Bill, where African-American World War II veterans were denied the benefit meant to increase prosperity for those who served. These men fought for freedom they were not afforded at home. I lived in Germany, and children learned the horrors of the Reich, Holocaust, and visit concentration camps. They learn atrocities their grandparents may have committed. What would you think if they didn't teach this? To those who oppose culturally relevant teaching and say you would feel disgust, please check your hypocrisy in the mirror. What are your motives to stunt the intellectual, personal, and academic growth of this generation? What defines your fear? White children feeling bad about themselves for learning the truth? Are they coated in fragile porcelain that they will crack with feeling uncomfortable? The truth emerges that this is more about you, your prejudice, and an unfounded fear at accepting the truth of history, that racism and oppression have been injected into the veins of our society, laws, and institutions since its inception. Thank you.
Thank you.
And you girls are brave.
Mr. Oreskovic.
I have in my hand a list of 205 teachers known to the superintendent as members of the social studies department who are teaching critical race. Wait a minute. Nope, that paper's blank, just like Joseph McCarthy's when he alleged the State Department was filled with communists. Fear did not win then, and it will not now. But lessons from the past haven't been heeded today. Facts fall to opinion and propaganda while boogeymen are everywhere. It seems some are believing the lyrics that history will teach us nothing. We recently received a new set of social studies standards, and teachers are at work crafting lessons for new curricula. These lessons will emphasize inquiry rather than memorization. But teachers have been using inquiry methods for years, engaging with primary sources so students can understand the why of history. Evaluation is not based on what a teacher thinks, but on what the student can prove. Inquiry helps students gain historical perspective, an understanding of the settings that are shaping people's lives and actions in the past. Critical thinking skills are taught and honed as students interact with primary sources to move from knowledge to analysis, evaluation, and finally creation through informed action. This final stage is important. Informed action allows students to demonstrate the ability to implement lessons learned from the past to affect change in the future. This is not indoctrination, but instruction. Students are learning how to identify facts and reliable sources to chart a course of action for change. Facilitating this type of learning means we must be honest about our past, not to place blame, but to ensure that we do not again fall prey to fear and ignorance. Neutrality favors the oppressor. We need to be rational and empathetic to the past journey of all Americans. We must be true to ourselves and our collective history so that we, the people, can achieve that more perfect union for what we've been striving since 1789. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Murphy.
Hi, my name is Kate Murphy. I'm a pastor here in Charlotte, but I'm also the mother of a 10th grader at North Mecklenburg, a 7th grader at JMA, and a rising kindergartner at Blythe Elementary. And in 1980, when I lived in Louisville, Kentucky, busing was instituted in our city, and my parents put me on a bus, and I started school at Whitney M. Young Elementary School on MLK Boulevard. And I had an amazing experience as part of a rich, diverse student body. But while I was there learning and playing and loving my classmates who were very different from me, I also learned that America was the greatest nation on earth. I learned that America had never lost a war. I learned that Kentucky fought on the right side of the Civil War, which was meant the Union side, which was not true. And I learned that MLK fixed racism. I learned in my very wonderful, diverse school that America had one story, and it was triumphant and heroic. I learned a whitewashed fairy tale version of American history. In 10th grade in my AP US history class, my teacher tried to teach me about Japanese internment camps. I stood up, threw my book on the floor, and yelled at him that he was lying to me. I simply didn't believe he was telling the truth because it went against everything I'd learned about American history. Who knows what I would have done if I'd learned about the Tulsa massacres, redlining, the 13th Amendment, convict leasing, and Emmett Till. I don't know what I would have done because nobody taught me about them. Nobody even taught me who Whitney M. Young was, even though I went to an elementary school named after him. Thank you for doing better by my 3 white daughters. I support these social studies standards.
So now we have Susan Ann Kudovich, then Glenn Stevens, then Tracy Gainey. Do we have Susan? All right, looks like you're up, Mr. Stevens. Careful. Go right ahead.
This past year accentuated several negative dynamics within discussions of our students' public school system. These dynamics, many of which have been on display tonight, do nothing to foster our students' ability to strive for their best possible outcomes. The first dynamic is a claim in which 2 completely opposing point of view appear to be logically equivalent when in fact they are not. This is represented by the belief that because the loudest on social media espouse one belief, that belief must in fact be true, as opposed to a second belief which may in fact have the overwhelming collection of data to support it. This is the danger of vilifying others on social media. If one is not careful, one's belief system becomes dominated by a singular mindset which may not be supported in confirmed data. And more importantly, it doesn't best serve our students. The second dangerous dynamic is substituting one person's actual position with a misrepresentation of the position, represented by the assertion that because one supports fiscally responsible government, one must be opposed to those who serve our students. In 1 year, my family has given more to our adopted son's team of educators than in my first son's entire 6-year lifetime. Yet my fiscally conservative views have been wrongfully characterized as being anti-teacher, a contention which only serves to shut down discussion and limit valid viewpoints. Finally, there is the dangerous dynamic of interpreting definitions of key terms wrongly, represented by the egregious way in which quality and equity are often misrepresented. Equality is a condition in which two separate quantities are the same. 2 + 2 is the same as 4. Equity is the allocation of resources in a way that differing students or populations arrive at their chosen outcomes, though the outcomes may not in truth be the same, nor are they guaranteed. The time is long past for the name-calling by some to stop and for our students to come first. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have Tracy Gainey? And then I've got another Joy Poe. Okay, then Jen Neitzel. And then after Jen, we've got Stu Lockerbie and then Julie Anna Kaufman.
So I'm up?
You're up.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Jen Neitzel, and I'm the Executive Director of the Educational Equity Institute, which is a nonprofit based here in Charlotte. I'm speaking tonight as an educator, but also as a mother of 3 children in CMS schools, a senior, a freshman, and a 5th grader. A large part of the work that I do focuses on providing professional development and consultation to schools and school districts who are looking to expand their knowledge and understanding of racism and the inequities within the educational system. We tell the true history of our country because it is essential that educators and their students understand the root causes of the ongoing inequities and racism within our society. We have educated thousands of teachers and other school administrators, and on the whole, the feedback we get is very positive. We hear a lot of educators say, "Why haven't we heard this before? Why weren't we taught this in school?" We will not eradicate the inequities within the CMS until we confront our complicated and hypocritical past. Teaching our history doesn't mean that we are explicitly telling white children that they are racist. Teaching our true history doesn't mean that we are out to make white children feel bad about being white. All of this is counterproductive to the cause. What is needed is an emphasis on providing opportunities for our children to learn about and discuss in a deeply intentional and developmentally appropriate way about our true history. This can be done, and it is essential for us to heal as individuals, as a community, as a nation from white supremacy and racism. No one is immune from their negative effects. You will also hear that teaching about history and racism should be left to parents, and I can tell you that as a mother of 3 boys, who I'm doing best to raise as anti-racist, I am fighting against social media, the media, and peers. This task is ongoing and daily and cannot be left to parents alone. I urge you as school board members to continue to support the use of culturally responsive anti-bias practices that promote the social, emotional, and intellectual development of all of our children. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have Stu Lockerbie, then Julianne